Amidst a sea of red from subprime losses, amidst a sea of rising unemployment, amidst a sea of red faces in Congress screaming about the Bear Stearns bailout, when are we going to get back in black? I got to tell you a couple of things that I've done recently that are pretty funny to some extent. Back in November, I went and talked to the U.S. Treasury, and I sat down with them and I said, guys, I just want to make this really clear. And I'd never done this before. I'd been always kind of in awe of them. And I said, please don't do anything about this weak dollar. Please. I want to be really clear about this. Don't do anything. Let it go. Because it's the one thing that's helping our economy right now. Well, let's get into our next quiz. Okay. Again, this is kind of the fun stuff, right? What determined the outcome of the Florida vote in 2000? Was it hanging chads? Raise your hand if you think it was hanging chads. Okay? Supreme Court? Okay? Or overseas absentee ballots? You know, there's only about 10 people raising their hands. What's up with that? The thing is, what's crazy about this, I mean, there's a lot of ways you could look at this, but it was really the overseas absentee ballots. Now, I don't have an axe to grind as far as Democrat, Republican, but let me kind of take you through this, and I think it's really important to understand, right? In the United States, right, we have these elections. There is fraud involved with every election. I'm not kidding. It may be mistakes. You could call it fraud. You could call it a mistake. But there are problems, right? If you really want to go back and take a look at some interesting mistakes or fraud, go back and look at LBJ and how he won the primary, which eventually won his seat in the Senate, right? And this is great, right? This is in Texas, of course, from where our current president comes from. And what's fun about it is that LBJ was running against this other guy, and they didn't want to report from the districts that they kind of owned, right, first, right? The reason why they didn't want to announce like what the polling from their areas was because they didn't want to tell the other guy how much they were ahead, so that the other guy could go back to his districts, recount the vote, and find like 10 more than he just had, right? So this is great. You go to LBJ's library, right down in Texas. There's a great picture, right? There's these guys, right? They're standing in front of, like, I think it was a Studebaker, I don't know what it was. There's like 4 good old boys, and they're all standing like this, right? And they're all got a big, grin on their faces. And their foot is on a box, and the box says 13, right? This is a famous ballot box 13, of which just miraculously appeared when LBJ was down by, 50 votes that had 100 votes, which won him the election. That's exactly the direction that we need to go in. And if you think about it, the epicenter for our credit crunch is all about housing, right? It's how do you value a piece of debt that's tied to an asset like a home if you can't value the home, right? What the heck with trying to value the debt? If you can't value the underlying asset of the derivative, which is the debt to some extent, how can you, it doesn't make any sense, right? So until that stabilizes, none of this works. Now it seems like we're getting to a point, we're getting close. We're getting close. Let's get to the next quiz. Okay. And since we just had the anniversary of Katrina in New Orleans, so during the New Orleans crisis, right, what did the media estimate for the number of people that died during that crisis? If you can remember. Don't raise your hand. I'm going to give you a big hint. You run up here. I don't know if you guys can see this. You see this guy? Can you see it? Who is that? It's Geraldo, right? It's a huge hint. It's a huge hint. When he's involved in stories, maybe just a little bit of overhyping. Okay, was it 5,000, 7,500, 10,000? 10,000. Right? How many actually died? How many? No, it was about 1,300. It depends on how you track it. Huge loss of life, a tragedy without question. But let me tell you, when all those images were being presented on CNN and Fox and wherever, and the markets were really juiced crazy, I mean, it was very difficult to get accurate information. Very difficult to analyze the situation without being emotionally connected to it. Now, the good news about this is
if there is good news, depending on your standpoint, is that it will tell you it really doesn't matter who's president. There are specific policies for the markets. Don't really matter. What matters is a little thing called gridlock or harmony. That matters a lot. So you can think about what Clinton may do when she's in office, what her foreign policy may do, what she may do domestically. They may go after big pharma. They may, well, they're more likely, Fannie and Freddie Mac are going to have their portfolios expanded anyway under the stimulus plan as well. It almost doesn't matter. But what matters is the level of overall spending. That's the key. This is my political theorem that holds true, I believe, very strongly. So this is the Busch political theorem, right? And here it is, in a nutshell. He who has the cash wins the bash. Basically, here's another Busch with a C theorem, political theorem. If Congress can raise your taxes without actually doing anything, it's pretty likely that they're going to do that. So right now, I think we've gotten past the abyss. We've actually stared into the abyss and we've seen ourselves. Some people probably saw Ben Bernanke, but that might have been disturbing. But the fact is that they were there. They came through with the plan to stem this from going from just a normal credit crisis to a systemic crisis. I can't think of a better guy to be at the head of the Fed right now. Ben Bernanke wrote his dissertation on the Great Depression. So he's familiar with the Herculean effort that you're going to need to get us where we need to be and to stem this crisis from spreading further. So I have a belief in him.
After anchoring the Politics and Money Show for First Business for 3 years, Andy has interviewed numerous political and industry leaders. He brings those skills to his onstage interviews and panel moderations for conferences. From the chairman of Black Entertainment Television to Chicago Union presidents to the chairman of the Yale Endowment Fund, Andy has interviewed a broad array of leaders, and his sessions always have the highest attendance. He brings energy and a sense of humor that is second to none.